Your wrists have to deal with a tremendous amount of stress when you play tennis, and that's why wrists are one of the most commonly injured parts of the body for all players, even high-level tennis players with good technique. So it's a really good idea for tennis players to do preventative work to reduce the likelihood of wrist injuries. And that's exactly what I want to show you how to do in this video. I'm going to take you through a comprehensive approach to preventing wrist injuries. Hopefully you find the video helpful. If you do, it'd be great if you give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel before, it really helps me out and it's much appreciated if you could do that as well. In order to prevent wrist injuries, there's a few different things that we need to work on. So this video is going to be broken down into sections. The first section is going to look at proprioception. So we're going to do some sensory work and then some joint mobility work. We need to make sure that the joints are sending good information back to our brain, because if the joints aren't moving properly, that in itself can be a major underlying cause of pain. We're then going to do some nerve work. Again, we need to make sure that our brain can send good information via the nerves to the muscles, and we need the nerves to be sending good information back from the muscles and from the joints. And again, if the nerves aren't working optimally, that can be a major underlying cause of pain and injuries. And then finally, we're going to do some strength work. Actually going to do two different types of strength work to target the muscles and to target the tendons to make them stronger and more resistant to injury. So we'll start with the sensory and joint mobility work. Now you might not have done sensory work before, but it's really simple. It involves applying sensation to an area. Now, the idea of this is as we do it, I'm rubbing my wrist joints and I'm rubbing the rest of the joints in my hand, and that just sends sensory information back to my brain, to a specific part of the brain, and it wakes things up and it helps prepare that part of the brain for movement. So it doesn't take too long, but it's a really useful thing to work on as part of your warm-up. So I'm just making sure that I rub all of the joints in the wrist and in the hand. So that's the sensory side done. Now we're going to work on some joint mobility exercises. Again, we're going to do all the joints in the hands and the wrist, starting with the wrist themselves. So we're going to go for some flexion and extension. So I'm just extending and flexing my wrist, just trying to make sure they're moving properly. I'm then going to go for some lateral glides. Again, just making sure the joint is moving properly and sending good information back to my brain. And then I'm going to do some wrist circles. And this is a joint mobility exercise, but it also works on coordination as well. I'm just trying to make as smooth a circular shape as I can, like that. And you can see I'm only doing 3 to 5 repetitions in each direction. It's not a massive amount of work, it's just enough to wake things up and send good information back. So that's the wrists. Now we're going to work on the hands. So we're going to do some happy hands. I'm going to pull my pinkies down and then bring them around like that. And as I do this, I'm trying to mobilize the joints in my hand as much as possible. So I'm really pulling my fingers down, trying to open up the individual joints. And then I'm going to do that in reverse. And again, just leading with the thumb, the index finger, pulling them down and trying to mobilize the joints in the hands and a little bit in the wrists. From there, we're going to start to work on the fingers. So I'm going to do finger circles or thumb circles to start with. So I'm just trying to do 3 circles in each direction. It's mobilizing the thumb joint. It's also working on coordination. Now, when I do these circles, I'm trying to keep the rest of my hand still. So I shouldn't see the whole hand moving around. I'm trying to isolate the joint itself and just create movement from that one joint. And I'm going to do this for all of the fingers, just 3 circles in each direction, trying to focus on the quality. Now, as I'm doing this, other fingers might move because there's some shared tendons, and that's okay, but what we shouldn't see is the whole hand moving. And also, when you're doing this, you want to be keeping your fingers completely straight. So there we go, simple joint mobilizations for the fingers. We're then going to do another mobilization now to work on the rest of the joints. So I'm rolling them down and waving them out, and then I'm just going to reverse that motion. Again, we're just making sure that the joints are moving properly and sending good information back to the brain. So takes a couple of minutes, some sensory work followed by some mobility work, but doing that regularly can be a really, really important thing to do for injury prevention. So the next thing that we're going to look at are going to be some nerve exercises. But before I show you them, I just want to let you know about some additional help that's available to you if you're serious about becoming a better tennis player. Now, you may or may not know, I mainly help players to improve their performance by using applied neurology and neuroscience. So one of the big things that I help players to do is improve their visual skills so they can react faster, track the ball better, have better timing and stuff like that. And I've created a free vision program to help you improve your visual skills so you can become a better player. If you'd like that free vision program, there's a link up there and I'll place the link down in the description as well. Now we're going to do some mobility work for a couple of the nerves that supply muscles in the hands, the wrists and the forearm. So the first one that we're going to work on is something called the median nerve. The median nerve supplies flexor muscles in the hand and the wrist. So when we work on nerves, we're not trying to work too hard on them. We're just trying to be fairly gentle with them. So you want to think about going for like a 3 out of 10 in terms of tension. So when you go into these different positions that we're going to go into, it might feel like a little bit of a weird stretch. It might also feel a little bit kind of electrical and tingly because it's a nerve that we're working on, but you don't want to go to maximal tension. Just stop at about 3 out of 10. Now, the way that we're going to find the position, we're going to spread our fingers, we're going to bend our hand back, we're going to take our arm down to the side, and potentially in this position you might already be feeling a stretch in your forearm or some tingliness into the fingers. But depending on your level of flexibility, we can then lift the arm away from the side a little bit and then we can lower the shoulder blade. Now for a lot of people, as soon as you start to lower the shoulder blade, it can really ramp up the tension. So just do it nice and carefully, don't do it really quickly, just slowly lower the shoulder blade and see what happens. And then from there, you're going to tilt your head away. So for me, when I get to this position, that's about a 3 out of 10. I can feel a stretch there and a little bit of tingling into my thumb and these 2 fingers. But then what we're going to do in this position is we're just going to mobilize the nerve. So I'm going to bring back my head back to the middle. That's going to take the tension off the nerve. And then I'm going to tilt it back. I'm just going to do that 3 to 5 times. And each time I do that, it creates a little bit of tension in the nerve. I'm then going to lift my shoulder blade up to take the tension off and lower it back down and do that 3 to 5 times. So again, just changing the tension in the nerve, trying to free up any restrictions in and around the brachial plexus. And then from there, I'm just going to do the same thing with my hand. So just bending my hand to take the tension off and then doing that with my hand to increase the tension. And then I'm going to shake it out, and that would be one side done. You can then repeat the process with the other side. So taking, spreading your fingers, bending your hand back, finding the position of tension, then working on the head, working on the shoulder blade, and working on the wrist. So that's how you can work on the median nerve. We're then going to do some work on the radial nerve, which supplies your triceps, but it also supplies muscles on the back of the forearm, responsible for wrist extension and finger extension. So it's very similar, just a little bit different. Now we're going to bend the fingers that way. So instead of bending them back, we're now going to bend the hand forwards or flex the wrist, bring our arm down to the side and internally rotate the shoulder. So before we externally rotated, now we're going to internally rotate the shoulder. Again, lift out to the side, lower the shoulder blade, and then tilt the head away. And this time we're expecting to feel a stretch on the back of the forearm, maybe the back of the wrist into the back of the hand. So for me, that's my 3 out of 10 position. And again, I'm going to mobilize from the head, do 3 of those, mobilize from the shoulder blade. And again, as I pull my shoulder down, it increases the tension in the forearm. And then I'm going to relax the wrist and then flex the wrist. So mobilizing this nerve in 3 different positions and then shake it out. And then again, repeat the process on the other side. So once you know what you're doing, you can see it only takes maybe 20 or 30 seconds to do. We're then going to do one final nerve. So this is the ulnar nerve. This also supplies muscles that flex the wrist and bend the fingers. But now we're thinking about the pinky finger and the ring finger. So you'll feel it in a slightly different place to before. So this time we'll be spreading the fingers, bending the hand back into this position, taking our arm out to the side. And when I get into that position, I can feel a fairly strong stretch. So for me, that is the maximum position that I need to go into. You might also need to tilt your head away and lower your shoulder blade a little bit. But for me, just this position is enough. But then I can drive the tension, tilting my head away to increase it, bringing it back to the middle to take the tension off. Same thing for the shoulder blade. So if I lift the shoulder blade up, it'll take the tension off. If I lower it, it'll increase the tension. And again, just maybe 3, 4, 5 reps of that. And then with the wrist, I'll relax the wrist to take the tension off and then increase the tension like so. And that's our final nerve drill. So we've now worked on all of the nerves that supply the muscles in the hands, the wrist, and the forearm. Again, once you know how to do it, it only takes 20 to 30 seconds to work on each of them, but doing this regularly is massively important for injury prevention. Now we're going to work on our first type of strength exercise, and for this exercise we're kind of focusing more on the muscles themselves, trying to make them stronger, and you're going to need a little bit of equipment to do this. So I'm using this special bar that just allows me to do additional weight or load additional weight and really monitor and progress my strength over time. If you don't have access to something like that, you can use a hammer, and you can get hammers of different weights that you can do these exercises really simply with. And then the final option that you've got, or there are a couple of other options, you could use a dowel or a pole of some sort, but I could be placing a weight on my racket and working like that. Now I won't be able to use a full range of motion because the weight will fall off, but I'll be able to work on some of the movements that we're trying to work on. But I'm going to be using the bar, and the first exercise that we're going to do is going to be pronation. So pronation is the movement that allows you to create topspin on your forehand. It's what gives you the power on your serve. It's technically the forearm, but we're going to class it as the wrist. So for pronation, I'm just going to lift it back up and I'm going to lower it slowly. So when we're doing this, we want to train the eccentric strength, so our ability to decelerate. So that's why I lower it slowly under control. If I do that, it's just gravity. If I lower it slowly, the muscles are working on the way down. So we'll lower slowly, lift back up quickly. And you want to aim for between 10 and 15 reps, and each rep is going to take around 4 seconds. So if I lower it for 3 seconds, lift it back up, lower for 1, 2, 3, lift it back up. If I do 10 reps like that, that's going to be 40 seconds, and if I do 15 reps like that, that's going to be 60 seconds, and that's going to be the right sort of length of exercise to really stimulate the muscles and help them get stronger. And I find that wrists don't need that much recovery, or the body doesn't need that much recovery when you're doing it. So I can do the left side, and then I can go on and do the right side. So again, just work through a set and do the right side for 10 to 15 reps. Then switch back to the left hand, and then we're going to work in a circuit. So I'm now going to work on supination. So I'm going to be lowering it the other way and lifting it back up. So slowly lowering it under control, lifting back up. Again, I'm going to do that for 10 to 15 reps. Change the right hand, go for the same thing there. 10 to 15 reps. From there, I'm going to move on to wrist flexion. So for wrist flexion, I'm just going to lower the weight under control, and then I'm going to flex or bend the wrist. And you're just going to do the maximum range that you can do without pain or discomfort. So I'm lowering under control and then flexing the wrist. 10 to 15 reps, switch to the other side, lower under control, flex the wrist. Then we're going to work on extension. So the exact opposite of that. Now I'm going to lift the weight by bending my wrist back, and then I'm going to lower it. Lift the weight by bending my wrist back, and then lower under control. Again, 10 to 15 reps, change hands, repeat the process, 10 to 15 reps. And then we're going to do one more exercise. So for this one, we're going to be doing ulnar deviation. So we're going to do radial deviation. So radial deviation is this movement, so it's going to be really important for the snap on the forehand. So I'm going to lower it down, and then I'm just going to lift it back up. So this is strengthening muscles on the wrist here. So again, if I lower it for maybe 3 seconds, lift it back up, 10 to 15 reps. Again, lower, lift back up, lower, lift back up. And that's my circuit. And you can do that for maybe 2 or 3 rounds. So we have supination, we have pronation, we have supination, we have wrist flexion, we have wrist extension, and then we've got radial deviations. They're going to be our 5 exercises. And again, 2 to 3 sets is going to be enough. And you can do this, 2 to 3 times a week is going to be a really good amount of work. And for me personally, I do this one in the evening when I'm watching TV. I just find it helps me fill some time and prevents wrist injuries. Now we're going to work on our second type of strength exercise. And for this version, we're going to be working on end range conditioning or end range strengthening. So it's going to work the muscles, but it's also going to be really good for strengthening tendons. And it can have a couple of different purposes. If you lack flexibility in your wrist, you can use these to help improve your wrist flexibility. But if you've already got very mobile wrists, then it's just going to really help to bulletproof you against injuries. So we're going to be working on wrist flexion and finger flexion in end ranges, and then we're going to be working on wrist extension and finger extension in end ranges. So wrist flexion, this is finger flexion, this is wrist flexion, but I'm going to go and lean forwards and put some body weight onto it to create a stretch. So in this position, I have a stretch on my forearm. Now for me, because mobility and flexibility tends to be my biggest issue, in this position I do a lot of long hold stretching. So I get into this position and I do deep breathing. So I'll breathe in for maybe 3 or 4 seconds and then exhale for around 6-8 seconds. And I find if I hang out in these positions for maybe 2 to 3 minutes, I can start to increase the range in my wrists. Some people find that they can increase their range much more quickly than that, but for me, I have to hold stuff for a long time. But after I've done that for a couple of minutes, then you're going to start to do contractile work. Or if you're already very mobile, you can just start the contractile work straight away. And we're basically going to work on 2 different movements. I'm going to work on bending my fingers. So in this position, I'm trying to squeeze my fingers into the mat. So I'm creating a contraction. It's called an isometric contraction because I'm not really moving anywhere because the mat's in the way, but I can feel a lot of tension in my wrists and in my forearms, the muscles working, trying to bend the fingers. So I squeeze and I hold here. And you can do this in different ways, but a good contraction for 6 to 10 seconds is normally enough. So for me, because I work on range of motion, I do that and then I try and increase my range a little bit. And then I squeeze again for another 6 to 10 seconds. And it might feel a little bit uncomfortable at the start. Don't cause yourself any pain, but you might need to get used to the discomfort and kind of get used to the feeling. But working on that for maybe 6 to 10 seconds, do a few different rounds of that. And then you can work on the muscles on the back of the forearm. So now I'm trying to pull my fingers up as much as I can. Now I can't go anywhere because I don't have any more range of motion, but I'm trying to lift my fingers up into the sky. And as I do that, I'm contracting the muscles on the back of the forearm. So we're working on the end range of motion. And again, 6 to 10 seconds is enough. Rest for a few seconds and then repeat it, trying to squeeze my fingers up as high as I can. Then we're going to go back to the flexors, and now instead of trying to bend the fingers, we're now going to be trying to bend the wrists. So I could actually push myself away in this position, so potentially I could go into a push-up position and create more resistance, but depending how strong you are, just leaning your body weight over and pushing your hands into the mat or the ground, you'll be able to feel it on the back of your wrists. Again, 6 to 10 seconds, relax it. And then another 6 to 10 seconds, strengthening the forearms, and then one final time. And then again, we're going to go to the back of the forearms now. Instead of trying to lift the fingers up, I'm now trying to pull the whole of the hands up. So the first time we were working on the finger extensors, now we're working on the wrist extensors. But again, nothing's going to move because I'm already in my maximum range of motion. But maybe you can see, or if I go around to the side, you can see if I'm in this position, I'm trying to pull my hands up. You can hopefully see a little bit of change in definition of the muscle. So I'm trying to pull them into extension. And again, same thing, maybe 6 to 10 seconds, rest a little bit, and then go again, do that a few times. And then we've worked on this position. We've done end range conditioning for our flexors and our extensors. and then we're going to do the opposite of that. And there's different ways that we could do this, but I'm just going to go into a kneeling position, and now I'm flexing my wrist, and from there I can hold out in this position to try and increase the range of motion for a little bit of time, but then I'm going to work on contracting the muscles. So I'm going to start by working on the wrist extensors by pulling my wrists back into the ground. So in this position, I'm trying to pull my wrists into the ground. I'm not moving anywhere, but I'm trying to do this. Again, 6 to 10 seconds, rest it. For me, sometimes that allows me to get a little bit more range of motion. So then I increase the range and then go, okay, 6 to 10 seconds. And for this one, I find just working on extension as one movement, so I don't break it down. I just try and pull them back, and then that gives me a little bit more range. So then again, I squeeze, work on those extensors, and just increase the range a little bit. And then from there, I can do flexion work. On the flexion, I like to work on bending the wrist initially. So just I'm trying to now bend my hand as far down as I can, or as far back as I can. 6 to 10 seconds and relax it. Do that a few times, trying to bend the hand back as much as you can. And you might find in some of these positions you're starting to cramp a little bit, and it feels a little bit uncomfortable. If you haven't done any short range work before, by short range I mean in this position, sometimes it gets a little bit crampy, but that's something that you'll get used to and you'll work through. But then the final thing that I'm going to do is work on bending the fingers and the wrist. So in this position, I'm trying to squeeze my fist as hard as I can, and I'm trying to bend my wrists like so. And then I relax it. Rest a little while, and then squeeze it and go for it again. So we're strengthening the finger flexors and the wrist flexors in this end range position. And that's the second type of strength exercise that you can work on. And what I like to do is kind of alternate between days. So one day I'll work on the previous drills that I've shown you using the bar, kind of focusing more on the muscles. And then on the alternate day, I'll focus more on these end range of motion exercises. And I find for me, I can recover pretty quickly from these. So I definitely wouldn't train big leg muscles, squats and deadlifts every single day, but I find that I can do wrist work, 5-6 days a week, and it makes things feel good and helps me to prevent injuries and doesn't tire things out. You might find that that works for you, or you might find that you need to do a slightly lower volume. So potentially you could do the other variation on Monday, this variation on Tuesday, the other variation on Wednesday, this variation on Thursday, and that might work well for you. Or potentially you do it all together in one big wrist program, and you just maybe do that 2 to 3 times a week. So there's no perfect way to set things up. It's all about how your body recovers to different types of training, kind of how strong you are and things like that are also going to have an impact. But you can definitely do the sensory work, the wrist mobility and the nerve drills on a daily basis and as part of your warm-ups and cool downs before you play. So that's a comprehensive approach to preventing wrist injuries. If you incorporate those exercises into your program on a regular basis, it's going to drastically help to reduce the likelihood that you'll get injured. Now, if you would like more help in this area or more help to improve your performance, I have a full coaching program where I work with experienced players, helping them break through to the next level. So I teach people how to use brain-based training to improve things like their vision so that they can react faster, so they can track the ball better, so they can focus for longer, how to improve their coordination so they can learn technique more easily and gain greater control over their shots, and how to improve strength and flexibility and power so they can reduce injury risk and so they can become faster around court. So if you would like to learn how to do those things, how to become a better tennis athlete so you can play higher level tennis, then there'll be a link in the description where you can schedule a time to talk with me to see if the program is a good fit. If you click on that link, there's going to be a quick survey for you to fill out, and that will kind of let me know whether you're a good candidate. And if you are a good candidate, it will then guide you through to my calendar. You can choose a time to talk, and then we can go from there. Okay, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you did, give me that thumbs up. And again, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, much appreciated if you could do that as well.